So you've heard Professor Sebastian Brion giving you an introduction as to why self-awareness is so important for our careers, and specifically the fact that we might have blind spots, areas of developments that we have no idea exist and other people aren't aware of that we really need to develop. What I'm going to be talking about now is more why self-assessment and self-awareness is so important to the career design and the job search process. In the last module, we presented this framework, this 7-step framework for career management. And as I mentioned, self-assessment is an absolutely fundamental part of doing this well. Why? Because you need to understand who you are and what you want to do, what value you can add to the market, where your strengths lie, and also by exploring the market and understanding what recruiters are looking for, you're able to understand how to position yourself. Now, self-assessment is also very important because I like this quote very much. And actually, the first time I read it was in a newspaper in India. And being Yogi Berra, I thought it would be one of these gurus, in India. And actually, I looked him up, and he's actually a baseball trainer from the 1950s. But his phrase really still stands. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to probably end up somewhere else. So if you can do the research that you need to do in self-assessment, you'll be able to trace a route which will get you to the next step much more effectively. Now, the other reason why self-assessment is really important is this concept of standing out from the crowd. Self-awareness results in you being a much more credible candidate for a recruiter. In all the interviews that I've done with different recruiters from different sectors, I always ask them, what specifically makes a candidate stand out, for you? And I can guarantee you that at least 80% of them will say self-awareness. Intelligence is a given, especially in something like an MBA program. There's a very strict admissions process. So we all understand, recruiters understand that everybody's more or less at a certain level. So intelligence is very much a given and background is very much a given. But what really makes a candidate stand out is their ability to understand who they are, where their areas of development might be, and being able to talk about themselves and the impact that they had on the work that they've done in a very clear and concise manner. Now, another aspect of self-awareness is if you understand yourself, you're going to be much more capable of understanding others, and that will make you a much more effective person at work. So it's good to do self-assessment because it will also give you a framework for understanding others. So self-assessment can imply assessing on a whole array of different areas. I'm going to be highlighting 3, which are the motivated skills, values, and your interests, because it provides a very nice framework for planning your next step. But there's a whole lot of other things that you can look at. So your career history, if you can really look at how you've taken career decisions in the past, it helps you have an objective point of view of maybe if you've made mistakes in the past, not repeating those mistakes in the future. Job satisfiers is very much about understanding what really made you feel that you had a great day at work. So when you're trying to assess different options in the market, you can really understand whether those job satisfiers will exist there or not. Your preferred lifestyle is very important, and especially in today's world where there's a lot of tension between work and life. I think you need to have a very clear idea of the type of life that you want to lead, because you'll be presented with job opportunities that don't fit that lifestyle. And if that's not the way that you want to live, then you have to learn how to say no to those options. Take management consulting, for example. I mean, these guys work between probably about 60 hours a week. If being at home is important to you, especially if you have young children, then it's a career that you're going to have to seriously think where you're willing to sacrifice your home life for the opportunity that it offers. Work environment. People don't look sufficiently into this, but you're going to have to, companies are very much like people. And you're going to like some companies much more than others, even if you're doing exactly the same job role, simply because the work environment suits you more. Some people like a very structured environment, and other people absolutely hate a structured environment. So when you're looking at job opportunities, you need to see what kind of work culture they have and see if that really fits you or not. And finally, your constraints. Mike Rosenberg already mentioned on this, but I think you have to have very clear what your constraints are. So you don't start looking at options which, those constraints are there. So for example, if you need to stay in a certain city because your partner works there and needs to stay there, then clearly looking at options outside that city are not going to be very effective for you. So at the very least, I want to focus on those three things that I mentioned earlier. So the skills that you like using, you need to understand what are the skills that you like using. And this is not necessarily what you're good at. I can be very good at numbers, but feel very bored by having to crunch numbers all day. It's the skills that you actually like using, because that will help you determine job function. The time of exploration, if you can really say, look, these are 3 things that I really love doing, and I don't only like doing them, but actually I'm very good at them. That will help you really determine whether that's a job function for you. Another area, your interest. Clearly if you're working in an environment or in a sector that you're interested in, you're going to be happier than if you're not. So if you start analyzing what your interests are, that will help determine the type of sectors that you can work in. And finally, your values. This tends to come at the second stage, but your values will help determine the type of organizations you want to work with. And values, I'm not talking only about ethical values. I'm talking about things like your sense of autonomy, your need for variety. Something like autonomy is extremely important, because if you're going to be working for a very flat organization, you're going to be a lot happier than if it's an organization which is extremely hierarchical, where you're going to have to be reporting to somebody all the time. So these are things that you really need to look at, because if I actually start interviewing alumni that have left their jobs, most of the time they're leaving it not because they're not using their skills and not because they're not interested in the sector that they're working in. Usually it's because of a values issue. And this is something that candidates very rarely look at. Now, if you get a combination of all 3, you're closer to being in your perfect job. One of the things that I would really recommend you to start doing when you start doing all these different exercises is to create a dashboard. And this is kind of you in a nutshell. So what you need to do in this dashboard is to start writing down the bottom line. What are the end results of all these reports that I'm receiving? Because this will help you answer some very specific questions when it comes to the interviewing process, or even when you're meeting somebody in a cocktail. If you really understand what your skills are, what you're good at and what your skills are, it very much addresses a key question, which is why should I hire you? If you understand, what your values are, what your interests are, and what your job satisfiers are, you're going to be able to answer very clearly what you look for in a job, and it's a classic interview question. Now, in terms of understanding your areas of development, is the way that they like calling them, but it's basically your weakness. Your weaknesses. What recruiters are looking for here is not necessarily, do they have a weakness? It's much more, are they self-aware? Do they understand what their limitations are? And are they doing anything about them? Because then they can understand that you're going to be doing something to address these weaknesses. Start doing your self-assessment exercises. Fill your dashboard with the different results that you're going to be getting from them. And then on the basis of that, we can start creating a matrix of career options. So coming up with a list of potential sectors and also job functions that might fit you. And then we'll be assigning you an extra exercise during the Explore module. So thank you.